This is the Roots and All podcast, and I'm your host, Sarah Wilson. Join me as I talk about all aspects of gardening with some of the top horticulturists from around the world. Hello and welcome to this week's episode, where my guest is Belgian nurseryman Karel Goossens. Karel runs an internationally renowned nursery supplying box plants and is the chairman of the Belgian arm of the European Boxwood Topiary Society. With decades of experience growing box, and an irreverent approach to tackling the problems that go along with it, when he was recommended to me, I thought he was my ideal sort of guest. He does recommend intensive cultivation methods, which include spraying chemical fungicides and insecticides, so this episode is not for everyone. However, I do acknowledge that many historic gardens are built around a backbone of box, and that many listeners are professional gardeners who deal with box and its attendant blights. So this episode is a practical look at what you can do.
So I am not educated because I am educated as a bookkeeper. I have not a training in gardening, but I was attracted to Boxwood because of a holiday we had in the south of France, and when I remarked the scent of the boxwood, for me the scent of eternity. So I was interested in starting with growing boxwood, and I started with taking cuttings with everywhere and on cemeteries and in farms and castles. And so it started, and that's about, so it started 34 years ago. But now I think coming to the facts with all the problems of boxwood, and especially now the biggest problem, but actually it's not the biggest problem, but most of the gardeners and also the industry and the scientists, they make it really an issue of it, but it isn't. If you execute the spraying in time with a product that is environmentally friendly, then it works almost 100%. But you have to respect the dates to spray. So the main thing and the key moment to spray is between October 10th and 15th.
So just to clarify, Karel, you're talking about the box moth here, aren't you?
Yeah, I'm talking about the box moth, yes. So that's the really key moment. Why? Then you kill them before they hibernate. So that means also that you interrupt the circle of the box moth. So that means also that there are no caterpillars in your plants from the half October on until the end of June, even almost the 10th of June. And that's really important because you don't have caterpillars in spring. You have to avoid at all costs to have caterpillars in spring, because when the caterpillars go between two leaves and the second part of October, they are untouchable until they come out and until they awake. But the awakeness takes about 4 months. So if you spray, for example, the beginning of April, there are still a lot of caterpillars between the leaves. So you have to repeat that and repeat it and repeat it. So, and most of the people are not prepared to spray as much as you needed to do then. So avoid it when you have no caterpillars in your plants, then there is no need to spray. So if you spray in October between the 10th and the 15th and not one day later, very important, then you are free of the caterpillars in spring, and the first spray is then around mid-July or 5 days earlier. The second spray is around August 20th, then September 15th, and then October 10th, 15th again. So this gives, let's say, a 100% result. No damage at all. You don't need a moth trap. Is a waste of money. You don't need it. You can only need it when the box moth has not arrived in the region yet. Then you can say, I can use it to see that the box moth is present. But otherwise, you don't need it. It will not help you in the battle against the box moths. If you, for example, in the garden put 100 box traps, it will not help you. They will eat all the boxwood that are standing there. So this is not efficient. Efficient is spraying on the right dates You can spray with any insecticide, but I prefer to use Bacillus thuringiensis because the Bacillus thuringiensis is environmentally friendly. If you can buy it as a professional, it is very cheap and it is also very effective. You only have to spray the outside of the plant because the caterpillars come to eat at the outside of the plant. You don't have to really to spray in the inside of the plant. This is not necessary. So it works very well. The only problem you can have with this that it's raining within 6 hours after spraying. So you have to avoid that. That's the most important thing. So if you follow the dates, of course you must have the discipline to follow them, then the box moth is not an issue at all. But of course, it's very strange that I am apparently the only one who says so. But you may believe me, it works very well. So this is my advice that I can give to the English gardeners who would like to keep their boxwood in their garden.
And you're obviously in Belgium. Do those dates vary much from Belgium to, say, where we are in the south of England or where I am?
I know that it's not that far away. Yeah? I think it's about 1,000 kilometers away. But this is, of course, I'm not sure about that. But I'm very sure that in the region of London, the south of England, even to the middle of England, that my days will work. Huh? But the fact is, anyhow, where it is in the world, the key moment is you must spray just before they hibernate. If it is in the United States or if it's in Australia, then you have to spray just before that. And then you must make a trial to discover when is the time to do that. Huh? But here for the most, and for the south of England and also in the middle of England, I think my dates will do.
And are there any varieties? I mean, I spoke to you previously and you were saying that if the leaves are harder, they're less susceptible to attack from all sorts of things.
They come from the Orient and they prefer sempervirens instead of the microphylla species. They will eat first the sempervirens species, and there are some cultivars that they don't prefer so much. But I think in the end they eat them all. When they can choose, they will go to the cultivars that they prefer the most, and from the species, it's all the sempervirens cultivars.
Also, you mentioned obviously box blight, and I think in the UK it's fair to say that a lot of gardeners aren't planting box, and as you said, they're taking it out. And it isn't just the box moth, it is as well the problem of blight. And how do you cope with that?
I can imagine that it is the mix of the two. Huh? They have already the problems with the blight, and then there is the moth, problem with the moth above. Thus, people decide to get rid of them. Huh? But here in Belgium, people take them out and throw them away because of the moth, not because of the fungus. But the fungus is more difficult to deal with. You have to fight against it every year again. And but of course, you can do a lot of things to avoid that the plants are weaker. For example, you can trim very heavily so that the air can come in, so that the plant can dry up much quicker. That is one thing that you can do. Also, avoid nitrogen, so that they don't grow too well, because that makes them all weaker to start the disease. What we also do here in Belgium is also a organic way of spraying with Unizan. Early in the morning when the stomachs are open, we go directly into the leaf of the plant, and the leaf becomes thicker. And because it's thicker, it's more difficult for the fungus to penetrate. Otherwise, the difference between cultivars who are more or less sensible for the fungus depends on the hardiness of the leaf. So a hard leaf is more resistant for blight than the softer leaves. For example, the new growth, for example, is also 7 or 8 degrees lower, vulnerable for the disease than already an adult leaf. But to spray with it, I think the most easiest way is still spraying with a chemical. The chemical is a triazole, the under commercial name acetabulconazole, tetraconazole, deficonazole. This is a systemic fungicide. But of course, if you would to avoid that, you can, the best thing, according to me, is whey. So whey is the liquid that remains after the production of cheese. And you can applicate it with really a great success. You can also add copper to it. Copper helps also until a certain height. And sometimes it's difficult to find where you have a farmer where they make cheese. But up to me, I also had a nurseryman who had also the production of bare-rooted boxwood plants. And since he used the whey, he never got the disease. So it worked even better than the chemicals. But the difficulty with the whey is that you really have to enter into the plants because it is a contact fungicide. So very important that you do this really very thoroughly. But it works rather well, and I think it's, for example, very interesting for a vegetable garden which is surrounded with box hedging. They can use it so that your vegetables are not infected by the spraying.
That's amazing. Do you have any idea why that works?
It's extremely acid, and there are also good bacteria in it. I think it's a bit the acidity and also the bacteria who are in it. You can compare it also with vinegar. Vinegar is also acid, and some people are also using this, but the whey is much more performant than vinegar, for example. There are two things that they are recognized from the European community as a fungicide, vinegar and also whey. So this means that European community, UK is not longer in it, but in Europe you may spray it, so it's not forbidden to spray it.
Okay. And in terms of where you plant your box and how you look after it, obviously you said you don't want to give it nitrogen feeds too much. Are there any other things we need to be careful of when we're planting them?
Normally, there is a lot of misunderstanding about boxwood. Most of all the things you have learned in school and everywhere, most of the time it's wrong. For example, the boxwood doesn't support clipping very well. So it means when you clip the plant, the resistance for disease is decreasing enormously. So up to me, you must avoid to spray and the time when the temperature is there to start the disease. So my suggestion is that you spray in winter. In winter, of course, it may not freeze too much, but a light frost, you still may spray them. If it doesn't freeze too much, you may spray your plants, but after we trim the plants, we spray them with Unison to protect the wounds. And that works rather well. We even have sprayed when it was freezing during the day, and you see a little bit of damage, but it recovers rather well. But we spray with Unison after we have trimmed the plants. When you trim in winter, normally the temperature is not there to start the disease. The disease can start at 12 degrees, but it must take a very long time wet then. Normally it starts at 19 degrees. By 19 degrees, and then the time for developing the disease is about 1 or 2 days. But when it's, for example, 24 degrees, it can start in 2 hours. But spraying is always preventing. It's not that you can cure the plants. This is not possible. But of course, it's up to me. Boxwood is not for everyone anymore. Only for those who really want to keep them, who love them, and who would like to continue with the plants and make the effort to take all the care of it. But anyhow, when the garden people think that you take other plants that remain green during winter, there also are disease in it, and they will also, when you use more, they will also more present. So it will always be something. But it depends, of course, how much that you like boxwood or not. Is there a substitute for it or not? According to me, it's not. but it depends from person to person, of course. But I think boxwood has still a place in the garden, especially in the historical gardens. There we have to preserve it because there's something from the past that we need to have respect for that. And that is very important because respect is also a kind of a key word in human life and also in gardening. It's a bit the same. That's the most important thing of all, I believe. So concerning blight, it's a struggle. But here, for example, Blight is in the nursery already for more than 20 years, and it still looks very well, very attractive. After all these years and all these sprayings and struggling to fight against the disease. But it depends also when you, to avoid the disease, where you plant them. A lot of wind, a garden with a lot of wind is a healthy garden. That's for all kind of gardens. When the wind can come in, it dries up more quickly, and that can really make the difference.
You mentioned about pruning, and you said about trimming in winter. Here in the UK, the way everybody does it is to prune, I would say, right in the middle of summer normally. Do you think that's the wrong time?
In the middle and summer, I think most of them don't do it also anymore because it's much too hot. It's much too hot now. If you do that, they are burned enormously. But I know everyone is trained like this. You trim and the month without an hour. So you start at the end of May and you end in August. That's a bit but how we did it also before. But by the fact that boxwood doesn't support trimming very well, and that because of that, that the resistance for disease is dropping enormously, really dramatically, then it is better to avoid that. But what I am telling here, I know that is against the rules they have teach the pupil in school and so on, but it's wrong. For example, what is also wrong about the pH of the plant. There's also a real big misunderstanding. The pH for a boxwood plant and a sandy soil is between 5.3 and 5.8. If it's higher than that, it's impossible for the plant, for example, to take up phosphor and manganese, for example, which is a very important trace element. These are all things that the people are not aware of yet. Even the nurseries are not aware of this too. So I think what we also have done, for example, using the English boxwood, the common simple variants, if you plant these plants as a bare-rooted plant, after 10 or 12 years, the hedge is falling open because the branches are not strong enough. Actually, we should have done this, not planting them as a bare-rooted plant, but as a root ball plant of, let's say, 8 years old with stronger branches. This is also very important. We could have also used other cultivars who are more stronger branches. This was also a possibility, but this hasn't happened because of the fact of gaining money. The garden architects and designers, they would have access to a lot of plants so that they could do a lot of things and the same cultivars. And that's why they started with the plants that were most available. And it started like that, but it wasn't always the best solution. I have in my garden, for example, also plants that were never so open. But when they are like that, then they are more vulnerable to start a disease because the top of the hedges remain longer wet because it's very, very, very hot. You can sit on it without falling open. There is really a lot of things to know about boxwood and to make the right choice.
You obviously have an incredibly successful nursery with beautiful plants. And I wonder why there is such a lot of misinformation. Is it just because people have products to sell, do you think?
Not only that, but for example, I had contact with a woman, she lives in London, I think, and she said to me the product that she used for Blight, for example, and I looked at it, and they were the right products, but it was diluted 100 times. 100 times for the same money. So can you imagine what this is if you would have an income of 100 times more? This is really crazy. So they can make a lot of money out of it. The industry behind it, they make the decisions, and the people behind are not aware of that. Yeah, for me, it's very strange that I am apparently the only one concerning the box moth, how to do it. So that's very strange. And most of the people also think, for the public, it's difficult to accept that one person is telling the truth. They think that the whole sector knows it, but it's not the case. It's not the case.
And if people did want to find out more or follow you, where could they go?
And I think the best thing to go is on Instagram. I will put on Instagram the dates. It's already mentioned there on Instagram. But next year, I will start also just a few days before when to spray. When to spray and with what to spray and explaining against why. Of course, there is a lot of things to say. People can also send me a message by Instagram or by Facebook or Messenger. That's the same for me. But I think there's a lot of things to do because there is a lot of misunderstanding on the whole issue of boxwood.
Thank you very much to Karel for sharing his knowledge, to my client and good friend Dr. Dakin for recommending Karel as a guest, and to you for listening. This week I chatted to podcaster Sally Flatman about my favourite clip from one of this year's episodes, which is included in her episode of Our Plant Stories that airs on the 15th of December, so please check that out. Now, here's Dr. Ian Bedford with his bug of the week, and of course, I couldn't resist getting his take on things.
The trade in plants and produce over recent years has become quicker and easier between countries throughout the world, but unfortunately, it's increased the potential for introducing foreign plant pests to new locations. These invasive species usually arrive without any of the predators and parasites that naturally keep their populations under control within their countries of origin. So without these natural enemies, the invaders have the freedom to rapidly increase their numbers and disperse within their newfound homeland. And this has been the case in Britain, with species such as the red lily beetle, harlequin ladybirds, western flower thrips, and more recently, the horse chestnut leaf miners and the Spanish slug. As time progresses, though, it's to be expected that the natural enemies of similar native species will start to recognise and accept the foreign species as a new food source, and will begin to slow down the speed of their invasion. But one thing's for certain, that whilst the global exchange of plant material continues, the appearance of foreign plant pests will have to be expected. Currently, there's one new invader that's not only causing concern for Britain's topiarists, but could sadly change the appearance of the country's many historic formal gardens. This is the box tree moth, a native to East Asia that was first discovered in Britain infesting box balls in a private garden near London in 2011. But within 3 years, quickly spread and became established across the capital city and into the surrounding areas. This medium-sized moth, recognisable by its white wings with an iridescent brown border, is still continuing to spread and has now been recorded throughout much of England, Wales and more recently Ireland. Box tree moths lay their eggs exclusively on box plants, and as their caterpillars feed, they cause severe defoliation, dieback, and cover the plants in white webbing, within which they spin cocoons and pupate. Although their biology is not yet fully understood, it is thought that up to 3 generations can occur each year, and that through the winter months, the box tree moth survives as small caterpillars hidden and protected within the webbing. As yet, it's unclear as to how the box tree moth can be effectively controlled in Britain, but recent sightings of blue tits searching box trees for the caterpillars could be a sign that, as usual, nature will eventually come up with the answer.
You can download or listen to the podcast direct from the website rootsandall.co.uk. Please also check out my Patreon, where you can make a one-off donation or take out a monthly subscription to help support the podcast. Because if you enjoy the show, please help it continue. I also have a GoFundMe where you can make a one-off donation. Even a one-off donation of £1 helps, and I'll be really grateful for your support. So please go to Patreon or GoFundMe and search for Roots and All podcast.